next UFC pay-per-view event is pretty top-heavy, especially when you consider that Derrick Lewis is a late addition to this fight card, where he will challenge Daniel DC Cormier for the UFC Heavyweight Championship of the world. But besides that main event, there's plenty to care about on this night of fights. My name's Flyin Brian J, and this is my top 3 fights that I think you need to watch at UFC 230.
Starting with number 3, Derrick Brunson vs. Israel the Last Stylebender Adesanya. This is a fight that could headline a lot of UFC events. In fact, both of their last respective outings were in the headlining spot. Brunson is a kill or be killed showman who fights with a lot of explosive offense and near non-existent striking defense that usually results in fan-pleasing performances. His last 6 victories are via KO or TKO, and his opponent was awarded a post-fight bonus in 2 of his last 3 defeats. The general consensus is that Brunson is going to run at Adesanya with his chin in the air. The question is, can Adesanya, who is way less experienced than Brunson, capitalize? The odds makers seem to think yes. The Last Stylebender is a 3-1 favorite in most books, perhaps for good reason. He is undefeated in MMA at 14-0 with 12 knockout victories, and on top of that, he has 75 professional kickboxing victories. In just 3 UFC appearances, he has been awarded 2 Performance of the Night awards. As Meatloaf says, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. His style is eye-catching, he mixes up his rhythm and throws a lot of long dynamic attacks at a fairly high clip. 2 things are great about this fight. We might be seeing the future of the middleweight division in Adesanya, and if not, someone is likely to go night-night. Number 2, the co-main event of the evening, which is a spot on this card that once belonged to Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Nate Diaz. Then it was Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold, but now after a Rockhold injury, the All-American squares off against former Strikeforce middleweight champion Ronaldo Jacare Souza. Weidman is the former middleweight champion, and he feels snubbed that he isn't fighting for the belt right now against Whitaker. Instead, he is here against Jacare, but evidently he thinks a title shot is next for him with a victory at UFC 230. Regardless of if you believe the Chris is Misty AF, as Eugene S. Robinson would say, but not so PG, you should know that this fight is amazing on paper. Wyden is an All-American collegiate wrestler who used that grind to put away the #1 contender, Kelvin Gastelum, in his last appearance, along with many other impressive performances. And he isn't just a takedown threat, he also has a BJJ black belt under Matt Serra. What's intriguing to me is that Jacare is a lethal submission threat with years of high-level BJJ experience and 14 professional MMA victories in that manner. It would be an honor to watch these 2 compete in grappling exchanges in the octagon, but that's not the only place this fight could be fun. Both men have finished high-caliber opponents via KO or TKO as well. All of that adds to the rhetoric that this fight is between the former UFC champion in Weidman and a former Strikeforce champion in Souza. I've got my eyes for this one being fight of the night. And number 1, the main event of the evening. I know that Cormier vs. Lewis was the obvious choice for the #1 spot, but I want to defend my pick a little bit here. There is a sneaky thought in my mind that Lewis's fights aren't entertaining, but I remind myself that in hindsight they almost always are memorable. You could say that his fight against Ngannou was god-awful, which it was, but everyone remembers it. Most of the time this man does nearly nothing right up until he decides to knock his opponent out, which is exactly how he found himself in this position. Lewis knocks people out, and when he does, it's in extremely violent fashion. Alright, so he's here a little bit because his star is just as bright as his balls are hot at the moment, but you get it. On the other side of this fight, this is Cormier's first title defense since knocking out Stipe Miocic and becoming the double champ. A loss for Cormier could result in his biggest payday imaginable as a competitor being pulled out from under him, the fight against Brock Lesnar that is looming, and a win could potentially mean a ton of huge fights on the horizon for the first ever double champ at the highest weight classes in the UFC/UFC commentator. Most of all, the reason that this fight is #1 is when there is a meaningful title on the line at any UFC event, it's likely to be the most important fight on the card, which is clearly the case, in my opinion, at UFC 230.
If you've got a second, please give the video a thumbs up, and also in the comment section, I want to know what you would rate this pay-per-view event on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best frickin' pay-per-view event in the history of time. I'm thinking like UFC 194, UFC 199, UFC 189, that type of thing. Those are 10 out of 10 in the rearview mirror, but what is this one coming into it? Thank you so much for watching, my friends. I'll see you next time. Namaste.